Well, good evening and welcome to our prophecy update here on October the 8th, 2023. As I say every week, first and foremost, in all sincerity, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to watch these prophecy updates. I know that your time is valuable, and trust me when I say that I do not take for granted that you do listen to these prophecy updates, and I do thank you. I am honored that you allow me to come into your homes and share this information with you. Now, my purpose in doing so is, like we say every time we have a prophecy update, is number one, to keep us all informed of what is really happening in this world, especially in light of all the misinformation that's out there and the lack of information that's not being brought to you. For us to be able to wade through this massive amounts of information to validate it, and in doing so to help us all understand how this can relate to Bible prophecy, especially in these last days. Now, for those listeners who are Christians, we're admonished 1 Chronicles 12:32 that we're to be like the sons of Issachar, who had understanding of the times to know what Israel ought to do. Even so should we in these last days understand what is happening in this world, to know that what we ought to do also, as Ezekiel 33 says, to be watchmen on the wall, and as Titus 2:11 verse 13, that we should look for and long for our Lord's soon return. Our goal in doing this for all of us is not just to obtain more knowledge, but if you will, for that knowledge to impact our lives and to motivate us in getting out this information to others here in these last days. And then finally, the last thing, of course, we have stated the most important thing: if you are a regular listener or a first time listener and you don't know Christ yet as your personal Savior, it is my hope and prayer that you will trust Him today while listening to this program. I do want to encourage you as we get ready to get kicked off. Um, the prophecy update on September 25th of this year. If you've not listened to it yet, I highly encourage you to do so. The only place you're going to be able to find it now is on Facebook. It's a lot of pertinent information. The title of it was "I'm Upset, Sick, and Tired, and Fed Up." And it was a very, I've been told, powerful message. YouTube took it down because it said, again, it violated their community standards. And bottom line is they just didn't want the truth to get out. So if you've not heard it yet, the September 25th prophecy update, "Upset, Sick, and Tired, and Fed Up," I encourage you to go back and listen to sometime this week. So let's start off this evening with two recent events, and then I'm going to talk about a couple other things after that. The most important thing that has happened since yesterday, that is happening right now in Israel. This morning, I posted on Facebook a 6-minute video by Amir Sephardi, and that as you listen to it, you have to kind of fast forward to the 2 minute and I think it's 32-second time slot on that video for when he actually starts talking. But it's what occurred in Israel yesterday. There are others I texted to that link, and if I didn't text you personally, then you can find it probably just before this prophecy update where you're listening now. I highly encourage you to do so. Needless to say, what happened is very significant and also tragic in many instances. I want to encourage all of you that are listening to be in prayer for Israel, to realize that what has happened is could be a very significant prophetic significance in what has happened and what may happen, and that this could be a catalyst to lead into the Ezekiel 38 war. Now, I'm not saying it is or not, but what's happening in Israel is very, very serious. Yesterday, on October the 7th, on the last day of the Feast of Tabernacles, at 6:30, there was a barrage of hundreds of rockets sent by Hamas terrorists into Israel. Nearly 50 Israeli military outposts along the border were neutralized. Within 20 minutes, at least 1,000 terrorists infiltrated into Israel on foot and in military vehicles and using drones. Within 1 hour, 200 Israelis were already dead. They also abducted, they say, at least 100 Israelis into the Gaza Strip that were men, women, children, the elderly, and people from all walks of life. The Iron Dome that we have watched over the years, especially in the last several years of my lifetime, that keeps any missiles from coming into Israel and hitting Israel, was neutralized by Hamas. And they know that this could only be done by one of two superpowers. In other words, they had to get the information and the training in order to how to neutralize that drone, and they're hoping the United States was not the one that did so. That only leaves one other country. Now they say what is happening in Israel yesterday and today is bigger than the Israeli war in 1948 when it became a nation, in 1956, the 1967 war, the Six-Day War in 1973, and in 1982. Israel has declared war. Everyone around Israel is on high alert, and without being sensational, as I said, this could be very well one of the major catalysts that leads into the Ezekiel 38 war. Only time is going to tell, but I encourage you to keep be in prayer for Israel and keep watching. So that's what's happening in Israel. Let's talk about the FEMA warning alert that happened just a few days ago. I think it was Wednesday. There was a lot, let's call it varied speculations as what the alert would be or what the alert could be about. Some of them were extreme, some of them were lighthearted, whatever. You may not realize this, and hopefully by now you've listened to enough news to know what's going on, is that this alert could have been, first of all, it could have been what's called a snap alert. Now, what is a snap alert? A snap alert is when the government comes out and tells us they're going to give us a test of a warning or an example, a trial alert, if you will, a trial warning just to see if everything's working properly. In the case the President of the United States has to say we've gone to war or something else has gone on major in the United States. A snap alert or warning is when the government says this will only be a test, but in actuality, it turns out to be the real thing. Now, they'll tell you that it's only a test because they don't want you to know ahead of time that it's actually real, and they don't want there to be a panic until they give out the actual alert. It had the very great possibility, real possibility, of the test on Wednesday of being, if you will, an actual snap warning, but it wasn't. Now, it's also obvious that no one turned into zombies, did they? However, 5G, with all that entails, both can and does affect people in different ways physically that a lot of people don't realize, and I'll leave that topic for another day. However, there are documented and were documented cases where people experienced ringing in the ears. Others experienced an unsettled feeling in their body, like something just didn't feel like, while other people experienced actual physical symptoms from the tone going off. This could have had a very real potential of being negative. Now, here's my question. Have you speculated? What is the reasoning actually could it have been for? Why did they set it off? I mean, why now? I know they do it roughly every 3 years, but why at this time they decide to set off that warning? Why now? Perhaps it might be better to ask is, why did they do it the day after Russia did an entire nuclear practice drill on October the 3rd, the day before our alarm sounded? How did that slip by the population? Coincidence? Well, if you've been following us any time now for the last several weeks or months, Rule 39. There's no such thing as a coincidence. Now, the sad thing is that most Americans, people you live with, unless you talk about it at home, people you work with, go to school with, shop with, play golf, bridge, pickleball, or any other myriad of sports, on the bottom line, they're either clueless, if you will, to what is really going on in the world, or they just don't want to know and want to refuse to believe what is actually happening. It's what I call the old ostrich with the head in the sand syndrome, or they're operating on linear thinking, where if it was fine 5 years ago and it was five days ago, it'll be fine now, a year from now, next week, next month, whatever. Now, if for some reason you don't believe me, I want to encourage you to do your own research. And while you're doing this, if you think people don't really think this way, that they're wanting to deny it or they're clueless as to what's going on, just bring something up that we've covered in any of these prophecy updates. The one tonight, the one last 2 weeks ago, whatever. Just bring something up in a conversation and see how they respond. Uh, it's interesting. You'll get dubbed a lot of different ways. Oh, that's just a conspiracy theory, or oh, you're one of those, or they pretty much shut you up, or shut you, cut you off almost immediately. And while what they fail to realize is that they're rapidly, with whether they're listening or not, especially if they're not listening, what they don't realize is they are very rapidly losing every freedom that they have. That things are actually falling apart around them, and the stuff is about to hit the fan is going to become a very reality. In fact, it is really, and I mean really, about to happen. Now, perhaps the FEMA alert was nothing more than just simply a test to make sure that everything is working properly. For when the next time it sounds, it might very well be the real thing. So, let's talk about number 3 tonight. It's coming, whether you're ready or not. So the big question I want to ask tonight, and the title of our topic is, how in the world did we get here? It's not like that we haven't been warned about what's happening today in the past. I mean, books from years ago that tried to warn us and of what was coming, but also what is now happening in my time, today in which you and I live. Let me tell you just some of the books I have. And listen, I have a lot of these books, but I'm just going to name about 3 or 4. One's called The Naked Communist by Larry Skousen. George Orwell's book. He tried to warn us of what was coming with his book called 1984. And we're actually seeing that dystopian society being pushed on us now throughout the world with the UN and World Economic Forum 2030 agenda. None Dare It Call It Conspiracy by Gary Allen is a tremendous book. This book's a primer for anyone who wishes to understand the basic workings of the global network of insiders that is determined to wield power over all of mankind for the coming New World Order. This special edition, one of the last ones that came out, was updated in 2013 and is still pertinent information in that book and now has illustrations and charts in it. Its introduction is by U.S. Congressman John D. Schmitz, and it says, the story you're about to read is true. The names have not been changed to protect the guilty. This book may have the effect of changing your life. After reading this book, you will never look at national and world events in the same way again. You can still purchase this book through Amazon.com, $15.95. The new updated version is around 2012, as I said, 2013. And though it's 10 years behind, it's still a great foundation for you and I to read. There's another book that I heard recommended on 2 cassette tapes. This was back many years ago. Oh my gosh, we're talking about 35, 40 years ago. I had 2 cassette tapes, and we got it from a church and special conference that went on. The cassette tapes, now think of how thin the tape had to be, were over 3 hours each. It had documentation about the Illuminati, and they would make a statement and give the work, and they would substantiate it and give you where you could find the information. And one of the books that they mentioned, I actually found the book they mentioned and recommended in an old bookstore called The Smokehouse, back when it was on Broad Street in Thomasville, Georgia, in the back room where they had books that didn't have room to put out in the front. It was first published in 1798 by John Robinson. You too can now still buy this book in Kindle format and on a regular paperback on Amazon. The title, Proofs of a Conspiracy, 1798. John Robinson was a Scottish physicist and mathematician. He authored Proofs of a Conspiracy, a polemic accusing Freemasonry of being infiltrated by the Weishaupts order of the Illuminati. He shines a light on the history, the workings, the continuing influence, and pernicious and hidden power of this secret order. It's a worthwhile book if you're interested in secret societies and how they work and to achieve their hidden agenda. The Illuminati conspiracy still resonates with its warning in the light of reason. It has its shadows, and even the most enlightened democracy can be manipulated by hidden hands. There's been other books since then. The newer editions and books that are out are The Great Reset, Joe Biden and the Rise of the 21st Century, Fascism by Glenn Beck. His second book that follows that up, The Great Reset and the War of the World, The Great Reset of the World by Alex Jones. Dark Future is the follow-up to Glenn Beck's book, uncovering the Great Reset's terrifying next phase, New World Orders, Worlds in Collision and the Rebirth by Terry James and Pete Garcia, and The Deep State by Alex Newman, who was just interviewed on Olive Tree Ministries with Jan Markell just recently. Now, the information is out there. Plus, you can see videos. So none of the things that you're hearing today or that you've heard on our previous prophecy updates should surprise you. And those people who for some reason don't know, they just need to get their head out of the sand, open their eyes, do their own research, start looking and reading. And once they've done it, we need to do something, because I'm telling you, our time is rapidly running out. And it may be, perhaps, we may have waited until it's just too late to do anything or to stop it. Now, in the previous prophecy updates, we have talked extensively, regarding what is coming and what you and I need to do to prepare. So you don't think this is all just something that I've been coming up with over the last year and a half. And though I've given you other numerous reputable sources in the past, let me give you another person's insight. This just came out recently by a man by the name of Doug Casey. Now, Doug Casey has a website called internationalman.com. He's a financial analyst, as well as a best-selling author, world-renowned speculator, and libertarian philosopher. Doug Casey has garnered a well-earned reputation for his erudite and often controversial insights into politics, economics, and investment markets. He recently gave, in an article on his website, 11 assumptions, not predictions, of what to expect from this great reset in the next several months, what is actually happening now, and what they're stating is their agenda for 2030. Now, as I list these, if you allow me to throw in my thoughts and personal ideas and insights, we'll look at this together. His first thing he listed was, it's happening now, and it's going to get worse. Less freedom of movement. They're already working on travel passports that will be required, which will have severe restrictions and requirements and affect your travel, not just by air, but also by ground. The 15-minute cities that they are right now targeting in the United States. Chattanooga on the East Coast is the one that's going to be really pushed up, and they're pushing for and already putting in thousands of cameras all over that city. And they have 1,104 on the table for the initial number of cities they're going to turn into 15-minute cities. Not to mention the cameras that I said that are going up in these cities. One's less than a half a block from where my wife and I live. And if you read, it's called a flock camera, F-L-O-C-K. It helps the police to monitor tags and to help cut down on crime. But then also it says on their website, you can also monitor the number of times your vehicle goes through every single intersection, which will be used to monitor your carbon usage. He also said you can expect in these freedom, fuel prices are going to, in the near future, skyrocket, and eventually they're going to be harder to even obtain fuels. Less freedom of movement. Number two, he said the CBDC is coming. In fact, it's here. Central bank digital currency will eventually eliminate all cash. I've mentioned in the past, cash gives you power. But there are already major indicators that several economies are already working to be 100% ready by 2025. We in the United States already have the FedNow system working here in our government and our nation. Once you and I go completely cashless, they will have complete 100% control of your money and every single thing you do. All based on an ESG score, environmental social governance. You don't have a good score, you don't have access to buy food, to buy certain kinds of food, to be able to travel, to buy fuel, numerous things that are out there. He said number three, a digital ID. Add to that, we have mentioned in the past, as well as Doug Casey, that we're rapidly heading toward a digital ID that will interface with your biometrics. They say that's going to come into fruition in September of 2024. For all of this to work, we will have to have a government ID and AI technology involved that will be associated with your photograph, your bank account, your carbon emissions, your ESG, your health, and so much more. How it will be implemented and deployed and rolled out is the question. They'll start off slow, but once it starts off, it's going to go forward rapidly. If you do any traveling, you'll find all over right now, airports all around the United States. It's advertising in airports, get your government ID. Now, isn't that interesting? You know, you always advertise first to build, to reduce resistance and to brainwash people that if they hear it enough, it becomes second nature to them, and then you actually do it. Now, without your ID tracking number, you won't be able to do a lot of things. And remember, we said this digital ID is on the agenda of 2030, and they want a digital ID implant put in your body by September 2024. Number four, the GFC 2.0. Well, GFC stands for Global Financial Crisis 2.0, will institute a Great Depression, greater than any depression this world has ever seen. Listen, economists as well as Doug Casey is saying when this hits, this depression is going to be at least 40 times worse than the depression they experienced in the 20s and 30s. That, he said, will look like a walk in the park. They're expecting this depression to hit overnight in 2024 that they say could financially wipe out this nation by 2025. With the rising food costs, the gas prices that continue to increase, products increasing, go out and eat at a restaurant. Listen, I went to a restaurant that I've been to before, and my goodness, just buying breakfast, I got an omelet, 2 champ patties, it came with whole wheat toast and grits, and also got one, now they're only giving one hash brown thing instead of the 5 little ones, $20. It's ridiculous what it costs you to go out and eat now. Farm production down with crippling cost of fertilizers and feed, thousands upon thousands of cows being destroyed, buying up of farms worldwide with no plans of or chance of being able to go back and rework those farmlands, supply problems, the destruction of our land and our waterways, numerous farms that are being turned into solar fields, which amazes me. My wife and I are talking about this tonight. They have this thing of they want to run everything by solar. Well, Tesla's largest recharging station in the world, they have now discovered, is charged by 3 very large diesel engines underground behind where the charging stations are. Hey, here's my other question. They're wanting to block out the sun to cut down on carbon emissions. Well, if they're going to block out the sun, what's that going to do with their solar fields? The thing that gets me with these people, they come up with these ludicrous ideas and they don't think it through. It's almost like their mind is blinded and twisted and they can't reason and they have no logic. They have no critical thinking. They just come up with an idea and don't realize the repercussions or anything that's out there. The definite also coming food shortage. Farmers have been warning us now for over a year of what's coming regarding major food shortages the end of this year and in 2024. And here's the other thing. If you let the government come in and do something on your land, let's put this tower up, let us do a sample planting in this one couple of acres to see what can happen. In fact, one farm was planting all their stuff and it blew over into the government's blew over into the other one, so it gave the government the right over this new person's farm that had nothing to do with what they were planting in the government controlled land. But the bottom line is, once you give the government one small smidgen, if you will, to do something on your farmland, because it's the government, now legally they can require you that you have to comply to all the carbon and the new Green Deal and all their carbon emissions and everything that they have as guidelines, or they'll shut you down. According to the World Economic Forum, the globalist elites, Henry Kissinger, Ted Turner, the United Nations, Bill Gates, Yuval Noah Harari, all of them have it in print and they are on video, that their goal is to reduce the population of the world by 90%. Think with me of just a minute about a wagon wheel. We all seen wagon wheels before. They have multiple spokes, each spoke representing a different item. So let's talk about finances, they say that the way to be financially successful, number one, is not get in debt and pay your bills and put by, say, there's guidelines out there, but they said not just to have one spoke of income coming into your home. The more spokes you have, the more secure you are of different streams of income to make your home and your situation more stable. Well, that's what they've done, these groups I just listened, when it comes to depopulating the world. They have a wagon wheel. In fact, it looks like a wagon wheel almost on the World Economic Forum website. And what they've done is every spoke is a different item that they're trying to depopulate the world with. Planned Parenthood and abortions. Another spoke is war. Another one is famine, crop reduction. 120 food processing plants destroyed. The polluting of our water and our land. The buying up of farmland, destroying cattle. Hunger and starvation. Planned pandemics and their answer to so-called fix the problem. Controlling what you can and cannot do. Listen, the list goes on. Their list is extensive on the World Economic Forum website. They have not just one way they're trying to depopulate us, they have literally almost hundreds. Number 5, financial collapse. We've already mentioned the rising inflation. There's going to be more coming bank failures that Doug Casey says the market is eventually going to be completely wiped out. The spreading out of the wealth to have equality in finances and in ownership, because remember they said they're going to continue to raise our property taxes, continue raising the interest rates, because their goal is you will own nothing and you'll be happy. And as I said, the depression that's coming with this financial collapse, if you add the BRICS nation in there, Brazil, Russia, India, China, Saudi Arabia, now 49 other nations that have pacted together that they are not going to accept the American dollar anymore. We can't use our American dollar to buy goods overseas. They'll not accept any payments from us. The dollar to them is worthless. Our dollar is going to collapse. The depression that's going to hit this nation, again, is going to be far worse than it was in the 20s. Number 6, increasing crime and disorder. We are coming closer and closer to communist and socialist society with massive migrations, economic depression, inversion of the laws and job loss. We can look and count on for crime to increase, and it's going to increase. People are going to become desperate to feed their families, to find a place to live. It's going to get to the point to become dangerous to go outside, and especially to go to the grocery store. They will rob you. They'll become violent. They will kill you if necessary. Whatever the situation requires, they're going to do whatever they need to do. And so I don't believe that. Well, look at Venezuela, the fourth wealthiest country in the world just a couple of years ago, and what has happened to all the people in Venezuela, what they have done, how they have acted out, and all those things I've listed, the things they will do because there's no food. it's going to become dangerous to walk down the street and to travel. Number 7, supply constraints. Supply constraints are increasing around commodities and energy. Now that's going to get worse. Greater constraints, this is what Doug Casey says, are put on our grid. There's going to be an increase in sabotage or using other means to bring our grid down. If you don't think it's real, how many of you went without power during the hurricane and for how long? The 40,000 people in North Carolina that went out without power for several days. The oil supply is down. The cattle production is down. They don't want you to eat real meat. Why? Because it's protein. But it's been approved that you can now start eating the 3D imaged meat that they're creating in a lab with a printer, and now has been approved by the FDA. The rice that we have access to, the pasta, India is no longer selling rice to the United States. Now, even though right now in some parts of our country things seem to be fairly okay in the grocery stores, though if you listen to Southern Prepper One, you'll hear places around the United States that are experiencing severe and serious shortages, that you can count on that there is time coming that very soon when the supply system completely crashes, we're going to see a very limited supply of a bunch of items. Now remember, in the past I have shared in talking to Publix one day, to the man that manages the store, I asked the question, how much food do you have in the store here at Publix as far as meeting the needs of our county? And he said, Greg, if you took Publix and Walmart and Food Lion and Bob and Jeff's IGA and every mom and pop store, and he said this is true in every city in America, and you combined all our food into one factory or one location, we have enough food right now in our city to feed 1/5 the population for only 3 days. Listen, you don't wait till a crisis happens to prepare for a crisis. I mean, I said this last night on the report I was on with a friend of mine that, we have life insurance, we have homeowners insurance, we have auto insurance, we have health insurance, we have all kinds of insurances. Why don't you have, call it what you want, preparing for a crisis insurance in the hopes that we never have to use it, but if we need it, it's there? And answer me this, why are the governments of Canada and the United States making plans, it's in the news right now, that they're going to take over all grocery stores, and they're starting with some grocery stores up north. In fact, Trudeau is stating, now listen to this. This is how stupid these people are. Trudeau just stated recently, inflation is due to climate change. Are you kidding me? And then he says it's all also because of the box stores. That's some of the stupidest comments I've ever heard in my life. And the way he said I'll fix it is if the box stores don't lower their prices by 20 to 30%, I'll shut them down. It's the same strategy they used in shutting down the small businesses during the pandemic. When the big box stores stayed open, now they're attacking the box stores. Doug Casey said prices are going to go through the roof on all items. Then he said number 8, World War III. He said not only is World War III coming, it's already here. Recently, the Army War College published a study saying we have come to the end of voluntary enlistment. Now, the government has been talking for the past year of reinstating the draft, and there's a great possibility it will be implemented in the next 1 to 2 years. Number 9, censorship and digital control. We'll talk more on this in a moment, but let me just cover this part of it. Censorship and digital control enter a new phase. They already know everything you and I say, and through our phones and through our texts and through our videos and through our smart TVs and everything. I mean, it's picked up outside. What they're doing is they know everything they're doing, that we're talking and saying. And it says if things keep going like they are, we'll see a deplatforming and a debanking and a shadow banning of all social media accounts. Now, what is shadow banning? Well, shadow banning is also called stealth banning, ghost banning, hell banning. Ghosting is the practice of blocking or partially blocking a user or the user's content from some areas of an online community, like YouTube has done with several of my videos, in such a way that the ban is not readily apparent to the user, regardless of whether the action is taken by an individual or an algorithm. Now, they've already started doing it. As I already said, YouTube is all wrongfully removed, and again, didn't violate their first policy. 3 of my prophetic updates, and they don't even go back to review. And when I request, they just give one of those, electronic answers. But see, they set the rules, and the rules a lot of time goes against the actual truth, but it goes against the agenda of what the government and the World Economic Forum and the UN are wanting to promote. In the near future, programs like this, Dave Hodges' program on the Common Sense Show, Southern Prepper One, Glenn Beck, the list is endless, Redacted, others that are out there. Don't be surprised if they're removed and if they become forbidden. And then you're not going to have hardly any resources for actual truth. Just this week, Biden has called all MAGA supporters, and I'll give you that quote in a minute. The people that make America great again, he's calling them domestic terrorists. It's also presented, if you and I present anything against the current administration, if that goes against what they're trying to do, we can now be deemed domestic terrorists, and I'll read you that in a moment. Well, welcome to the flushing of our Constitution. Their laws that they're changing is, they say, overriding the Constitution, which is against what the Constitution says they can do, especially in the area of free speech. And with your social credit score, your ESG, it will determine and put you into a type or class of citizen of what you really are. Number 10, U.S. elections. He said the U.S. election, regardless of the outcome, is an inflection point, a moment when significant change occurs, and it's going to be used as a potential flashpoint. There's talk both publicly and privately that there may not even be a 2024 election. Now imagine the chaos. And even if there is one, the Democratic Party has pushed for open borders on purpose. Now there's 7.2 million illegal immigrants in the United States, and every one of them are be given not without having gone through the proper channels, without having to do what all these other immigrants that came over to become a legal a resident of the United States. They're giving these illegal immigrants federal picture IDs. They're giving them more money than what a senior citizen gets in his Social Security retirement. And why are they doing it? 7.2 million new people sure does help bring a vote. Number 11 is the psychological warfare. The population of the United States, and for that matter the world, is being manipulated, brainwashed, conditioned, and programmed. It's been slowly and subtly at first. I already mentioned they were warning about it in books years ago. But they're very aggressive now. They're open. They're blatant. They're in your face. They want you to know what they're doing. And we're living in a time to see the culmination of their labors and the fruit of their undermined planning. And they're not slowing down. Told you back last year they were going to hit the ground running in 2023. I just didn't realize how fast and how fervent they were going to be in accomplishing their mission to see their Agenda 2030 come. They want to come to fruition, the predominant most of us, this year. Now, the last thing I want to share is called the 1984 dystopia effect. I'm going to read to you from the Epoch Times. And this is where we are in regards to what we just talked about, in regards to what them banning, if you will, censorship of what you and I can say. Let me read it to you. The FBI has been targeting former President Donald Trump and his supporters as domestic terrorists. This was done through a subtle change in language, a minor alteration in how they label domestic extremist terrorists. But the minor difference has sweeping implications. It changed the standards so that a group could now be targeted for their political views. Listen, this is pure communism. This is what they did in communist Russia. This is what have done in communist countries around the world. And the same communism is being promoted by our government now. In an article from Newsweek, it's a leftist article. There is an article that was in a recent Newsweek that said Donald Trump followers targeted by FBI as 2024 election nears. It says in which it shifted the definition of AGAVE, AGAAVE, which stands for anti-government, anti-authority, violent extremism, from furtherance of ideological agendas. They changed it to furtherance of political and or social agendas. See the difference? For the first time, groups could be now labeled terrorists because of their view on their particular politics. Even Newsweek noted it was a subtle change, but little noticed, but has a gigantic departure from the Bureau. It gives new powers to now target political enemies, people that are trying to keep, say, the current administration from coming back into office. They have redefined terrorism. Because of this, they can now use the expanded powers of counterterrorism. They don't need evidence of guilt to go after you, which includes over half of the country's voters, which is Donald Trump and his supporters. Trump and his supporters have been deemed as domestic, violent, extremist terrorists. In fact, they're even calling it a cult. Conservatives are now being targeted, such as parents who confront their school board now can be put into jail. Homes being raided by the FBI for people standing out in front of abortion clinics, calmly saying that don't believe in abortion. The list is endless. Now, it's okay for the Democrats, when Donald Trump was in office, to stand up and say, go to where these conservatives are and yell at them outside of a restaurant and get in their face and scream and holler at them. But it's not okay for the other way, which the conservative side doesn't even do. Biden supposedly denies this extremism, but let me remind you that speech he had last year with the dark red and black background. That was a communist type background. And where in that speech he lashed out against the MAGA movement, and I quote, MAGA forces are determined to take this country backwards. Backward to an America where there is no right to choose, no right to privacy, no right to contraception, no right to marry who you love. They promote authoritarianism of their leaders and fan the flame of violence, though it's usually the Democrats that allow the violence to go on and say it's free speech and expression, but you don't see the conservatives doing it. And he said, who are a threat to our personal rights. Recently, Biden gave a speech in September of this year. He said, there is something dangerous happening in America. There is an extremist movement that does not share the basic beliefs of the democracy, the MAGA movement. Not every Republican, not even the majority of Republicans embrace the MAGA ideology. I know because I have been able to work with Republicans my whole year. Can't find that in his resume anywhere. But there is no question that today's Republican Party is driven and intimidated by MAGA Republican extremists. Close quote. Important. Let me just say, it's one thing to express views that disagree with the other side of the aisle. Political speech is one thing, but levering against your proponent because they disagree with you is counter-terrorist, is unconstitutional, it is against the law, and it's another thing altogether. But that's what they're doing. You see, there's a massive global censorship movement being promoted not only domestically but worldwide. And it's being pushed and promoted by the United Nations, the World Economic Forum, and the globalist elites. UNESCO, United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. This is on their website. has a broad program to crush what it calls conspiracy theories. It promotes symposiums on addressing conspiracy theories, climate change. If you say climate change is a sham, you're a conspiracy theorist, and you can be also a terrorist. If you do have viewpoints against COVID-19 or the vaccine or a pandemic that don't align up with the official government narratives, you can also be targeted as an extremist, a conspiracy theorist, and a terrorist. You see, in doing that, they're wanting to put you into, and amazes me that Hillary Clinton is pushing this now vocally, and amazes that, I'll not get sidetracked, that they're wanting to force you into global re-education centers. They state, and I quote, all conspiratorial thinking threatens human rights and values. Conspiracy theories that propagate hateful or discriminatory messages may present an immediate harm to other learners, groups, and communities. Although these conspiracy theories can be addressed using the tools and approaches listed above, educators may need to consider additional steps to address incidents of hate or bias involving conspiracy theories, or if educators are concerned about a learner's susceptibility to violent extremist propaganda. Let me tell you something. Have a young person sit in a classroom and say something positive about this republic or about the things that MAGA stands for without even mentioning MAGA and our Constitution and our freedoms and our liberties. Where the anger is going to come from is not your child presenting it. It's going to come from the teacher and everybody else in that class. They say you can now violate human rights just for your thinking. And they're calling for a global joining action re-educational program that involves governments, social medias, civil societies, academia, and private sectors. In 2020, the World Economic Forum stated that conspiracy theories have flourished during the pandemic, and here's how to stop them in their tracks. Defy them, debunk them, and report any conspiracy theories in order to prevent its spread. Doesn't that sound like mind control to you in 1984? UNESCO is working with the European Commission, social media, governments on this campaign, and it is UNESCO's Think Before Sharing, Stopping the Spread of Conspiracy Theories, Fact versus Fake. The UNESCO Director General stated conspiracy theories cause real harm to people, to their health, and also to their physical safety. They amplify and legitimize misconceptions about the pandemic and reinforce stereotypes which channel violence and violent extremist ideologies. What does the bottom line mean? Bottom line means that anything and everything that you say that differs from the globalist 2030 agenda and the 17 SDGs of the United Nations, whatever their narrative is, it goes against their globalist community and one world government. You are a conspiracy theorist and a violent extremist, if you will, terrorist. Now, what's coming down and what is happening is deadly. It is well planned. It is being strategically carried out with a fervency. And everything that we have mentioned here, you're about to see change very quickly. What you're going to deserve experience that almost one night you're going to wake up and the next morning your freedoms as you know it are going to be gone. Prophecy updates like I share with you here and other venues and other people that share on YouTube and on Instagram and other things like that, they'll no longer be available or tolerated. Life is going to completely change. And it's going to happen in what seems like a blink of an eye. One day you'll go to sleep, the next day it'll be totally different. And for most people, they're not prepared for this mentally, spiritually, financially. They're not ready with food and water or medicines or protection, and the list goes on. But life as you know it is about to be over. And you need to prepare like you've never prepared before. Dave Hodges on the Common Sense Show says that you need to prepare with food, water, medicine, tools, guns and ammo, gold and silver. But most of all, you need to prepare spiritually. And yes, you do. Listen, I don't think we're going to stop what's coming down the pipe. I don't think it's possible. I think all this is lined up for the tribulation period that's getting ready to go into effect, which means the church has to be removed prior to the tribulation period beginning. And if all these things we see happening are lining up literally with specific Bible prophecies in the Old and the New Testament, how close is the rapture of the church? If you don't know Jesus Christ as your personal Savior, you need to trust Him. And how do you do that? Well, you have to realize, number one, you have a problem. We all have that same problem called a sin nature. As it is written, there is none righteous, no, not one. For as by one man Adam sin entered into this world, and death by sin, so death passed to all men, for that all have sinned. We have a sin nature. And it says, for all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. We've all committed sins. Sins of omission, commission, presumption, transgressions, iniquities, thoughts, actions, things that violate the principles of God's word. God is a loving God, but He's also a righteous God, and He cannot simply overlook sin. Sin has to be and will be paid for one way or the other. And God says, I'm going to give you an out, and I'm going to give you the way that you cannot face what's coming. Eternal separation and damnation, separated from God from ever, and not have to go through the tribulation period. To realize He says, I have one payment for sin that I'll take. It's not baptism. It's not good works. It's not my good outweighing my bad. It's not taking communion. It's not doing the rosary. It's not prayers. It's not saying a specific prayer. It's not anything that you think you and I can do to merit it. 1 and 1 can never be greater than 2. It can't be 3. It can't be 4. It can't be 5. It can never be greater than 2. So if I'm finite and unholy, my finiteness and my unholiness cannot produce infinite, eternal, or can it produce holiness? I can only give out. Listen, you and your wife come together, you're not going to have a dog or a cat. You're going to have a child. That's all you can produce. And when it comes to being lost, all we can produce is sin and death. And God says, the wages of the payment for sin I will take is death. But I have a gift for you, and that's through my Son, Jesus Christ, the Lord. So what did Jesus do? God commended or showed His love toward us, and that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. God does not want His wrath to abide on us forever. But there's only one way that wrath can be removed, and that's through Jesus Christ. He is the way, the truth, and the life. No man can come to the Father but by Him. So what did Jesus do? He died on the cross. He died on that cross, and that sin nature that you and I have was placed on Him. He did not become sinful. Jesus does not have a sin nature. He's never become sinful, but He paid for our sin nature on the cross 2,000 years ago. And when He did, for He, God the Father, made Him, God the Son, to become sin for us, who knew no sin, that we might become the very righteousness of God in Him. How do I get to heaven? I got to be as righteous as God. How do you get to heaven? You have to be as righteous as God. How do I become that righteous? Jesus Christ will impute that righteousness to you if you believe He died for you on the cross, not only paid for your sin nature, but 1 Peter 2:24, He bore all our sins on His body on the tree. He not only paid for the root cause, He paid for the fruit also. Jesus has paid for all of it. The question is, have you appropriated that free gift of salvation? For by grace are you saved through faith. And that not of yourselves, it is a gift of God, not of works, lest anyone should boast. God says, all my righteousness in His eyes is like filthy rags. There's nothing I can present to Him that merits my salvation or yours. We just can't do it. I am not redeemed by corruptible things like silver or gold or the traditions of men, but by the precious blood of Jesus Christ. For God so loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son, that whoever believes in Him will not perish, but have everlasting life. And God did not send His Son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world through Him might be saved. Have you trusted Christ as your personal Savior? There is no other name under heaven, Acts 4:12 says, given among men whereby we must be saved. But God leaves the choice to you. He loves you enough to not make you an automaton. You have to choose. And whatever you decide to choose, and when you take that last breath or that trumpet sounds, that choice will have determined what happens to you for all eternity. I want to encourage you to trust Christ right now. There was a book that was recommended to me several years ago. I've gone back and I've started reading that book. I've already mentioned to you already. But then there's another thing. There was a movie called The Matrix. Some of you watched it. You saw the thing with the red pill and the blue pill. And most Americans live in a fabricated society, an America that they still think it was like it was 10 and 15 years ago. They're totally aware of reality of what's going on, like with the 2 pills. And now you have a choice. You can ignore everything that was said here, and you can go to bed tonight and get up tomorrow and you go, that guy's 3 fries short of a Happy Meal. Yeah, okay, maybe so. But what if I'm right? What if you've been totally unaware and now you've been given the choice to take either the red pill or the blue pill? One pill, you wake up and you'll just forget all this and things will continue to be in the fake world that it's in, that you fabricated in your mind and you hope still there. Or you can take the other pill and you can have your eyes opened to that this is really true. But you have to choose which pill to take. In the book of Esther, in Esther chapter 4, verses 13 and 14, Mordecai talks to Esther and says these words, do not think in your heart that you will escape in the king's palace any more than all the other Jews. For if you remain completely silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place, but you and your father's house will perish. And then listen to these words. Yet who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this? And perhaps you've been given a choice also for such a time as this, at this period in time, and our time is short. Now, the book that I just mentioned that I was told about years ago, I purchased it. It's been, I think I was back in 11, 12 years ago. It's by Milton William Cooper, called Behold the Pale Horse. Interesting, after he wrote this book, he was murdered. Let me read to you just part of the introduction and then we're going to close. He says, I believe, therefore, that a grand game of chess is being played on a level that we can barely imagine, and we are the pawns. Pawns are valuable only under certain circumstances and are frequently sacrificed to gain an advantage. Anyone who's studied military strategy is familiar with this concept of sacrifice. And you must come to know that the ultimate outcome of the game is the only thing that counts. You were lied to if you were ever told that it does not matter whether you win or lose or how you play the game. You see, because winning in the world is of the elite is everything. Indeed, it's the only thing, because the power elite intends to win. He goes on to say, my research has shown at this point that the future laid out for us may be just about impossible to change. I do not agree with the means by which the powerful few have chosen for us to reach the end. I do not agree that the end is where we should end up at all. But unless we can wake the people up from their sleep, nothing short of civil war will stop the planned outcome. I base that statement not on defeatism, but on the apathy of the majority of the American people. 25 years ago, I would have believed otherwise. But 25 years ago, I was also sound asleep. We have been taught lies. Reality is not at all what we perceive it to be. We cannot survive any longer by hanging on to falsehoods of the past. Reality must be discerned at all cost if we are to be part of the future. Truth must prevail in all instances, no matter who it hurts or helps, if we're to continue to live upon this earth. At this point, what we want may no longer matter. It is what we must do to ensure our survival that counts. The old way is in the certain process of destruction, and a new world order is beating down the door. To cling to the past is guaranteed suicide. To remain apathetic is assured enslavement. To learn the truth and then act on it is the only means of survival at the moment. To shrug off the information and to disregard its warning result in the complete destruction of the Republic of the United States of America. You will never get a second warning or a second chance. Like it or not, this is it. Stark reality. You can no longer turn your head, ignore it, and pretend it's not true and say, well, it can't happen to me. You can run or hide, but the wolf is at the door. If we do not act in concert with each other and ensure that the future becomes what we need it to be, then we will surely deserve whatever fate awaits us. He closes out his introduction by saying, this is my creed. Number 1, I believe first in God, the same God in which my ancestors believed, and I believe in Jesus Christ and that he is my Savior. Number 2, I believe in the Constitution of the Republic of the United States of America, without interpretation, as it was written and meant to work. I have given my sacred oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and I intend to fulfill that oath. Number 3, I believe in the family unit, and in particular my family unit. I have sworn that I will give my life, if it is required, in defense of God, the Constitution, or my family. 4th, I believe that any man without principles, that he is ready and willing to die for at any given moment, is already dead, and is of no use or consequence whatsoever. William Cooper, August 3rd, 1990, Camp Verde, Arizona. He wrote this book, which is full of just unreal, insightful information, and was killed later for writing the book. I close out our prophecy update, as I do every single time, by a quote from Chuck Missler, a man I highly respect. We have been plunged into a period of time about which the Bible says more than it does almost about any other period in history, including the time when Jesus walked the shores of Galilee and climbed the mountains of Judea. I encourage you, Maranatha, Jesus is coming again, and he's coming back very soon. I want to encourage you, go back and listen to this, do your own research. If you agree with what's said, share it with others and warn them while you still can. But most of all, thanks for watching.